Welcome. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Guild of Music Supervisors for Your Consideration panel series sponsored by Amazon Studios. My name is Vanessa Jorge Perry, and I am a music supervisor, and I am a GMS board member. I've been a board member for over 2 years, and I've been involved with the Guild for over 10 years. I always encourage people to join. There's so many wonderful things about the Guild that I love, and membership is reserved for music supervisors with screen credits. Musicians, publishers, library owners can subscribe as friends of the Guild to receive monthly newsletters, events, invites, discounts. Angela will put a link in the chat, and we really love your support. We want to thank Amazon for sponsoring this for your consideration. And today's panel is Small Acts. And our moderator today is Tim Greiving. And Dennis will be joining the conversation a little later. So thank you for joining.
Well, thank you all for being here. And it's my pleasure to be here. I write about film and TV music for a living. And this is a very music heavy series to be talking about. I have the pleasure today of talking to the musical genius wizard behind Steve McQueen's incredible Small Acts series on Amazon Prime. Ed Bailie is a music supervisor from the company Leland Music. He has a background in music publishing, and he previously headed up the film and TV departments at Blue Mountain Music, representing music by Bob Marley, Toots and the Maytals, the Congos, Third World, Bob Amal, and Bug Music, who published songs by Bruno Mars, Frank Ocean, Johnny Cash, among others. In 2016 and 2017, Ed was awarded Advertising Music Supervisor of the Year at the Music Week Sync Awards, and he currently sits on the advisory board of the UK and European Guild of Music Supervisors. So, welcome, Ed.
Thanks, Tim. Very flattering intro.
Did I get all your highlights?
Yeah, it's condensed into a finely crafted paragraph. Cheers.
Yeah, that's what I do. I condense. Well, anyone who's seen these films comes away talking about the music, especially one particular scene in Lovers Rock, obviously, but not just that. The LA Film Critics Film Association named Small Acts their best film of 2020, which was sort of interesting. I don't want to say controversial, but it was sort of, is it film or TV? But when they wrote about it, they talked about how it celebrates reggae as a life-giving force in general. And then I was looking at a review of Small Acts yesterday, and it talked about the medicinal power of music for the people in the films. So, music isn't just a soundtrack. It's not just background. Not that it ever is. I evangelize that music is never just background. But I think in Small Acts, it really plays a special life-giving power along with other stuff.
Absolutely. I mean, Steve McQueen, when we first were talking about this, certainly with Lovers Rock, was referring to it as his musical. It was kind of part of his way in, but obviously this isn't a performance piece musical with songs that have been constructed around character performances. It's his love letter to musical memory. A lot of the stories within across the whole series are real life stories, and the Education film and the Lovers Rock film are the two which are more kind of pulled from bigger ideas and not about specific existing characters, but they're about culture and about moments. But with Alex Wiesel, with Mangrove, and with Red, White and Blue, they're all real life lived experiences, biopics, and within all of them, music has played quite a central role in identifying those characters and their journeys, which is something which was really close to Steve's heart, and a real honor to kind of be part of the team that could then research the era, make sure that it all locked together correctly, but then also was correctly constructed and put across for each of those real people's history and connected to their real stories.
Yeah. And for the audience, music is like a time machine that, it situates us in this very specific time, culture, place, So it's very useful or transporting for us, but then it tells us something about the story being told, the characters in each story. I just think it plays an outsized role.
Time and place and environment are all key to painting the picture of each of these cultural moments. We're focused on London predominantly, but they're hopefully internationally recognizable and relatable histories. They're obviously really important pieces about race and about the general musical catharsis that is experienced by each of these characters in each of their individual films is incredibly important. But they're time capsule pieces that kind of sum up a time and a spirit and like you say, a certain escapism and just a truth to each of them musically. There's few times where songs are used in a way that emphasizes dread beyond score, for instance. It's actually very often used from a place of love and escape. And there's really a handful of moments where the music, such as Mika Levi's score in Mangrove, and a few moments where a kind of abstract tension is put across in the education film, where we have a really drawn out version of House of the Rising Sun, where a teacher who's neglecting his classroom is forcing them to listen to his performance because that is his stage, incorrectly so. Those are the kind of few moments where actually music is used in a way where it kind of almost has negative connotations for those who were being depicted on camera. Other moments are joyful.
I want to break it all down, but let's watch the trailer first, which kind of gives us a taste of some of the musical character in the whole series.
Check 1, 2. Shout out all the ladies worldwide.
There's much to play, 'cause I know you feel the same. I can see it in your eyes, 'cause I got no time to live this life, 'cause I got no time to play your city.
These are new types of human beings. They are not demoralized or defeated persons. They are leaders, but are rooted deep among those they lead.
We mustn't be victims, but protagonists of our stories.
Don't you think it's time things were different?
As individuals, we have an impossible battle. As a collective, we stand a chance.
If you are the big tree, we are the small axe, sharpened to cut you down.
So a little mix of the joy and ecstasy and terror and all those things rolled into one. Was that Mika's score layered in there?
Yeah, so that's a piece of score from Mangrove, which is based around the protest march and kind of using the rhythm and the chant and then building upon that. I mean, Mika's approach was incredible across this, and Mika and Steve worked really closely and tirelessly to find the perfect balance score-wise of being able to follow our lead characters, the Mangrove Nine, Frank Critchlow, particularly on their journey through their improper court case and arrest off the back of what in the UK in the at the time in the late 60s, early 70s was referred to as a fray, effectively public disorder for marching for their civil rights, and being able to make sure that their more intimate soundtrack, the beat of the drum and the strumming of the guitars stood separately from when they're in the courtroom. And when we're in the courtroom, we have this woozy, grander orchestral sound that helps make that space feel alien and a bit more inhuman and untouchably like large in scale. But it's got this wooze to it in a way that Mika really addresses quite beautifully, to feel kind of detached and oppressed by that courtroom. So that's, you hear the more kind of Mangrove 9 side of the musical themes in that trailer.
Mika's very good at creating unease.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, absolute genius.
So the title Small Axe, it's from a proverb, but most people know it from the Bob Marley song, which we heard just a snippet of. You don't actually use that song in the series, do you?
No. And you know what? It's like, it was discussed early on. We use other Bob Marley songs. It wasn't a cost thing or anything like that. It was actually creative choice that the moment didn't feel like it presented itself to draw full attention to it. We don't have sort of title sequences. There weren't moments where this is the one moment within that scene that we need to pin that on. So Steve opted not to approach for it, but then was really keen to have it in the trailers. Yeah.
And it speaks to the fact that music and songs and the songs of this era were just baked into the whole concept of it. Steve gave an interview recently. He said, I think if Bob Marley didn't exist, a lot of people would have had breakdowns. He gave an understanding of oneself in an environment that wasn't particularly inviting. So that sort of spirit is there in the title, which, infuses the whole thing.
For sure. And Bob was hugely important internationally, for sure, and over time, posthumously, for sure. But for the UK, for Black communities, certainly in the early 80s, late 70s, when, for instance, the Brixton riots happened in 1981 and followed on from the New Cross House fire, which we touch upon in the Alex Wheatle film, accompanied by Linton Kwesi Johnson song/poem, New Cross Massacre. After those events, the Black People's Day of Action happened, and Bob Marley's Get Up, Stand Up was like an anthem to that march, and all very soon after followed by Bob Marley's death and the Brixton riots. And it was just this whole cultural moment and anguish around the loss of someone who I've heard many people refer to as effectively a kind of cultural prophet. He was somebody who was holding up a torch to an unspoken voice, and was starting to get his cut through. So his fingerprint is always going to be across films about this time and place. So he's all the way through it without needing to draw upon that song directly as a specific sync use. But the title, I think, kind of says it all, and the whole proverb of you are the big tree and we're the small axe really surmises the whole series, really.
Yeah. And for people like me, ignorant people like me, my knowledge of reggae music doesn't go much beyond Bob Marley, and there's clearly such a huge variety across the whole series. And I listed off some of the artists that you had an experience with in your background in publishing, but how much of this job was an education for you, musical education?
Every day on it, really, and I was working on it for a long time. I mean, I had the pleasure of my first kind of job in commercial music being, like you say, in a publishing company that continues to have a lot of reggae. And we were an independent company based in Notting Hill in London, in-house, with a really small team. And it was a real independent that was still living those days. And it was Chris Blackwell's company. And it was just kind of an epicenter of reggae for London. And a great schooling for me in terms of going to local record stores in Notting Hill, most of which were reggae specialists. And it was, for me, my first kind of scene in London, not being from London. So So that's always going to be with me. But this journey was far more personal stories. And Steve and his collaborators had written musical cues into scripts or had put musical prompts into the scripts that from day one, I was needing to deeply research and make sure that we were being really true to the time and the place and the era. It wasn't just about shameless crate digging of finding really cool unsung reggae tracks that actually at that time no one really knew, or it wasn't just about reaching for the biggest hits. It had to feel that each of those characters would have had access to those records and would have loved those records. And that's kind of where the research role of the music supervisor comes in, whether we're applying it to a 1920s film where we're talking about the Charleston and kind of things like this, or whether it's a 1970s and 80s series of films which are based around reggae and dub and lovers rock. Getting into research mode and picking up the phone and talking to people who were there, who get it, who still celebrate it, live and breathe it today, is the most enjoyable part of the role, really. And for 2 years, that's what it was, because there was also a lot of calling in of favors and trying to find people who own rights to certain songs that have never been registered properly, or their rights have kind of fallen by the side of the road when different catalogs have been bought and sold, and trying to piece it together and not just give up on those songs because they were important to us creatively. So yeah, a lot of digging, a lot of soul searching, and a lot of deep research throughout it for quite a long time.
How much of the particular songs were specified in the scripts?
It changed from film to film. There were a lot in Mangrove, and I mean, my first meeting with Steve was the kind of walking in. First time I'd ever met Steve, I was kind of going in. He was on set filming Red, White and Blue, actually, and we were about to start shooting Lovers Rock. I think this would have been 2019. Kind of going in, clutching a script where there had been various tracks that had just been struck through and kind of notes in the column about whether or not they were going to be viable. And we were on the verge of about to start work on Lovers Rock. And Steve 100% wanted to make sure that all of the music in this film was played back on set, caught on microphone. It's playing through the sound systems that he's putting in this real house. It's done properly. He was going to make that party. He was going to create that environment, and he was going to get that real connection from the cast. So musically, we obviously had to clear everything up front because we didn't want to have to overdub things afterwards. We didn't want to have to inhibit the impromptu nature of people singing along or any parts of his vision for creating a real life party. We didn't want to have to then overdub with just people kind of zombie shuffling to a different track and having that disconnect that isn't real in a lot of films. So we had to get it right straight away, but he was really understanding of songs that were in the script that he couldn't have. I think there was a good sort of third of the songs from Lovers Rock that we kicked out off from day one. That he did have Silly Games in there. Him and Courtier had written that in and always had it as this moment. We never foresaw that it was going to be 11 minutes of film. So that kind of changed as we moved through the edit, but he always had this vision. Like he always knew where he was going with that. In terms of other tracks that were kind of written in, I mean, there was a lot of collaboration on Lovers Rock for party tunes that were going through it, like Junior English, Leroy Smart, Dennis Brown, Louisa Mark. There was a lot of tracks that we put in that first meeting, which was just kind of going through songs of the era, songs that would encapsulate the Lovers Rock vibe, and then also dub tracks as we kind of went into the deeper, bassier part of the film. Alex Wheatle was a whole different experience in that Alex Wheatle has the most music out of all of the films. Obviously, there's tons in Lovers Rock. For a 1 hour film, it's dense, but there's maybe 5 more tracks in Alex Wheatle, and that was a lot more of an exercise in post-production, and we could get a bit more crate diggy. It was his curios, and so a lot of that was playlisting and running stuff by Steve and seeing what it was that would resonate with him. but he's such a musically, he's a music fan, but musically led director anyway, in terms of like he thinks about the sound, the taste, the smell, everything about a scene. So he's always clocking up what could be there. So that he's always going to have ideas. He's looking for ideas to enrich things, but he's always bringing stuff to the table straight off the bat.
It's interesting because outside of Mangrove, there really isn't score.
There's none actually. It's all only in Mangrove that we have original score. Yeah.
And so a lot of the songs they're not needle drops. They're used as source because they're coming out of a source on screen oftentimes, but they work like score so much of the time. And you use dub, as score in a way, as kind of an instrumental underscore in some ways that still steep us in the place and maybe have a source within the world of the story, but it is essentially acting as a film score.
Yeah. Quite a lot. I hadn't really kind of thought about it as consciously doing that, but we do quite a few times. The needle drop moments are more like the kind of Cry Tough and the originals at the front of Lovers Rock. Later on in that episode, things like Revolutionaries, which I remember Steve writing in the script, or Quarter writing the script perhaps, that it was going to be a moment of meditative dub, and one of the characters was worshipping the bass, and it always needed to be this kind of this dog whistle moment that was going to really grab someone. It was just kind of, you have to kind of straight away, you're alert to this piece of music coming on the sound system. There's a lot of moments like that are very much in situ, but then we do have things like Leroy Smart, Prince Far Eye. We've got a lot of really great dub tracks that kind of play through it to emphasize other moments. We actually did have one other original cue, which was Dennis Bovell actually wrote for us when there was a piece of music that we wanted to have in a certain sequence, but the rights were kind of too much of a mess. And he just so happened to have some time and was up for writing us an original piece in Alex Wheatle, which was really awesome because we had worked with him impromptu throughout the series, through reasons we can get into later. But when he was around to then contribute musically as well, that was a really nice moment, because it's this there's this great film called Babylon that you should check out if you've not seen it, which is a really iconic indie film on similar subject matter and but of the era, and he did the original score for that. So it was kind of like a really nice hark back to this independent film. And Dennis's route is in Lovers Rock, but also in dub, and that track had more of a kind of dub tone to it, and was very much used in a score respect rather than a needle drop.
It's serendipitous you just basically introed him, because I'm told that he's joining us now. So,
Dennis.
Hey.
Hello, Dennis.
What's up, bro?
We were just talking about you.
Oh, wow. Be careful what you say now. I got ears everywhere.
Well, we summoned you.
All right. No,
only in praise.
I've just been, oh, great, thanks. I've just been at the funeral of an old friend. In fact, the guy who it was that introduced Linton Kwesi Johnson and myself. He was an old school friend they were classmates. And when Linton was about to set music to his poetry, his classmate said to him, look, I think that Dennis Bovell's our best bet at someone who knows how to record reggae. Because I think musicians had suffered at the hands of engineers who weren't quite packed with it, and couldn't believe the amounts of bottom end you had to put on the bass drum or on the bass guitar, for instance, and then when they caught onto that, they put bass on everything. And and ignored the treble end of it. So being that I, had been in recording since at school, I'd learned sound engineering. So I would often come head to head with these engineers and go, get out of the way. I know what to do. And then do it. And Viv Weathers was one of these people who admired me for doing that. And so he said to Linton, look, Dennis Bovell's the man. And they came to me with Linton's first album. And since then, I've recorded with Linton, you know, this last 45 years. So it was a funeral that we had both to be at. Linton spoke and
sorry for your loss.
Vivian Weathers, a great bass player. Yeah,
that's an immortal series of records that they've gifted us by that introduction.
Yeah,
between you and
yeah.
So
very sorry.
I'm recovered now. There were moments of melancholic, you know, and emotional, but I think it's all away now. So what are you guys up to here?
We're talking about music.
All right.
And we were talking about you.
Okay.
And, you know, you're obviously very involved in the Lovers Rock episode of Small Axe. But I was curious, since that's your, you know, your home turf, if you could explain the origin of the term Lovers Rock as a genre.
Well, I worked with a record label called the Lovers Rock label, and it was in a studio called Eve Studios, and it was owned by a man called Dennis Harris. So he built this studio and handed me the keys. Said, "Here you go. It's you can do whatever you want. Just make sure I get an album to put out every month, right?" So one of the first albums we released was an album called Who Said Go There. And that was termed that way because it was a sound system term. You know, DJs would frequently bawl out in the club, "Oh, sir!" And as the audience retorted, "Go there!" That was licensed to mash up the sound, you know, to throw down some heavy dub plate echoes. But, you know, "Go there" means, you know, don't stop, right? So I relayed that to him. And he said, right, that's the first, the title of our first album, Who Said Go There. And we decided to not give any information at all about who was playing, where it came from. It was a white label. Because we wanted to dispel the myth that reggae could not be properly recorded or made or to sound like its Jamaican counterpart in London. And I thought, what a cheat. I've never seen a Jamaican tape recorder or a Jamaican microphone. But there is how your ears work and how your fingers react with your eyes and what frequencies you decide, yeah, that's the frequency I want. Leave that there. And don't doubt yourself, you know. So later on, as we were looking for artists to put on this label, his labels, he wanted also a new label. And I reported to him that the current chant in the dance hall, because I was a sound system operator, so I operated a sound system called Sufferers Hi-Fi. So I was very close to the audience, you know, and that kind of stood me in good stead to hear what sound systems, the frequencies that could be pumped out and what frequencies should be put in to the mix, you know, so that when it went on the turntable in the sound system, you didn't have to adjust it much. It was like, boom, you know, I knew what frequencies from playing in the sound system. So my engineering job was like, just make it sound like it's going to sound in the sound system, you know. And I reported to him that the new talk was Lovers Rock, because we were making songs with young ladies being the focal point rather than young men, because there was a lot of male, you know, the reggae business was highly testosterone, right? And, you know, then it was going into the Rasta thing, and it was like Jah, Rastafari, Dubwise and all. And it seemed like the young ladies were left to be backing vocalists. So I decided I was going to write some songs for a female singer. And that lady was called Marie Pierre. And, you know, I experimented with her with this Lover's Field. And then once I had the song Silly Games, I looked for a singer that I thought could scale that very high note. And I knew it would be Janet Kay. And when I, you know, played the song to her on the piano and then told her, well, here now you got to go. There, she was like, what? You can do that? That must be easy for me. And I thought, go right ahead. So she scaled it. It was like a pole vaulter, you know, running up with the pole and then hold it, you know. And it hadn't been done before in that way, that higher note in a song that had a chorus, a verse, had this bridge bit, and it had its like introduction. It was like a proper pop song. But I wanted to do it in the reggae vein because I had this drum beat that I wanted to dethrone Sly Dunbar from being the king of reggae drums. And he's a friend of mine, but I wanted to make a pattern worthy of him, or a little bit, you know, crazier, more like juggling. So I had this idea to play the hi-hat pattern very much like a calypso. There's lots of calypso, you know, had that to it, the top end, you know, and the frequencies way past 10K, like up in 16, you know. And then I wanted to have the floor drum, the kick, to be like a disco, because disco was happening, you know, that was the rage at the time, the 70s, like, you know, the disco, four to the floor, the kick drum. And then have the drummer do a flick on the snare like Afrobeat, you know, and there amalgamate those four styles.
Did you realize at the time that you were creating a fusion? It was a conscious thing to be like, I'm making a new genre here by taking...
Yeah. I wanted this to be the new face of reggae. I wanted all reggae songs to play like that. But it was so crazy that once one tune had gone through the net and gone boom to the top of the charts, I dared make another tune with that beat. It'd be like, is that all you can do? It'd be like the same disco, and every tune, hundreds of tunes with that beat wouldn't have gone down because you needed a special drummer to play that, because it was like juggling with balls, you know. So when I showed it to Angus Drummy Zeb from Aswad, because he was the young, you know, bull on the corner, and the only one I thought that could hold a beat that could challenge Sly Dunbar for his huge and enormous beats on reggae and his whole work and his deservedness of being the king drummer. But I noticed that reggae had a way of, when you hit on a new beat on the drums, it became a new fad. People, you know, warmed to it, and if it was a nice one, you'd made it. So we decided to dazzle them with that drum beat. And then the chords going round and round, and with the strings and, you know, and then that high note. And boy, when they heard it, it was like, whoa, thank you. The appreciation.
I think the cue that you wrote for Alex Wheatle, remember the score cue that you wrote for us?
Yes.
Authentic Dub. You had the Drummy Zeb played on that, right?
Absolutely. You know, I mean, Drummy Zeb is my drummer. And, you know, I like machines, but when you get a real drummer to hit those skins, right, it has an edge.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So I can say the sound has an edge. I mean, machines are machines. I mean, I have before now programmed a machine to sound exactly like Family Man's brother, Carlton Barrett. It took me the whole night to make 20 seconds of drums. You know, that was how much detail I had to attend to. And I was only making it for an advert, TV, and it's like a Wailers sound-alike.
Yeah.
You know, but it couldn't sound like the Wailers unless you had that drum sound, authentic of that drummer, you know. And that's what's made me not a big fan of machines, but I'm a fan of men, other people that can do the thing that if, you know, someone knows how to tell the machine how to do it, okay, but it takes a long time before that machine understands what you want, because, I mean, until they made machines that were touch sensitive, you know, drums machines weren't going nowhere, because you could hit something softly and just touch it and then hear it come back, whack, in the face, you know. Yeah. And I think Korg were the first people that made a machine, the DDD-1. Yeah, Chris Blackwell got me one of them back in the 80s. And,
was that the delay?
No, it's a drum machine.
Oh, is it the DDD-1?
The DDD-1, yeah. It was the first touch-sensitive drum machine available in the market. It was made by Korg. And, you know, I used it for a couple of things, but then afterwards I thought, what am I going to tell this machine? And I got to battle with it the whole night to make it remember what I wanted to do. And if I get somebody in here, you know, like Drummy Zeb, and go, yo, this is the lick, you know, and it's human.
No, you need sweat for these kinds of things, I think. Sweat and blood.
Yeah. No tears.
No tears. Maybe some tears.
Of joy.
Yeah. So Silly Games was intended for kind of the centerpiece of Lovers Rock from the script stage, right, Ed?
Yes.
Yeah, it was. And then I remember the first time when there was like an active conversation that when I was in the room where Steve was talking about it, and Dennis and I had just worked on a side project. We had a studio session, and it was just kind of this kind of fate moment of Steve then's talking about he had it in mind for ages before I met him, but then when we were there, it's like, hey, I just worked with Dennis a few weeks ago. The light in Steve's eyes at that moment of the idea of Dennis was profound. It was just this kind of, we must meet. We have to meet. We have to talk. And then straight off the bat, you could, like, Steve was thinking about ways of getting Dennis into the Lovers Rock film. There was talk of having you a cameo as it's kind of started as a bus conductor role that hadn't been fulfilled yet. This was right before the shoot. Every role has been fulfilled. So he's like, how can I get that role? Yeah, where can I put him? And it just went so much further and all the better when Dennis ended up being at the party singing Silly Games. You can hear Dennis's unmistakable booming voice in this octave, not in the...
I went up there. That was Sandra. What's Sandra's name? Sandra Green?
I need to double check Sandra's surname, but she smashes the note, doesn't she?
Man. And I was stood right next by her, so I can verify it. That was her voice. She hit that. And Steve was the one who said, Dennis, you need a dancing partner. Okay, I got a dancing partner for you, and just delivered her to me and said, this is your dancing partner. I was like, pleased to meet you. And then he also said, and she can hit the note. I was like, okay. You believe so, Steve? I believe she will. And then when she hit it, I was like, yep.
She actually can.
And did.
Yeah.
Did that blues party bring back memories for you?
Many memories. And as I was stood there, I was like, I don't know, I felt at one point like a fairy godfather looking down on all my godchildren and seeing that they were dressed in the way that I was and my friends were, and they were dancing in that way and dancing to them. It's like Back to the Future,
Yeah. And
the costume department did an amazing job on that as well, didn't they, Dennis?
Yeah.
It's incredible.
Absolutely. And the choreographer, Coro Messam, right? She was in there every minute. Said, stop. You're not. Your hand's not in the right place. You're not moving to the right way. And I admired her because she knew all the dances and was fit enough to demonstrate them. Not just take a girl's partner and tell the partner, okay, now you hold me here, you touch me there, and we do this, and our heads are gonna that, and then we, and she had her eye on all the couples in the room that were dancing. Like the camera was zooming around, but she was zooming around. Making sure that all the costumes were on right, making sure that the dancing was happening. Oh man, it was an operation, and actually seeing it back on the screen, spot on.
And Ed, you were saying it was important to Steve that it actually be a music live in the room party. But those songs that are used are not randomly chosen, and they're not in a random order. I assume that there is a storytelling reason for them landing when they do in the progression of the film.
For sure. There was a path to it all. Things kind of, we wanted it. Steve was always looking, and Courtier, his fellow scriptwriter of Lovers Rock, was looking for that path through the night from the kind of more pop side, like Dennis was saying before, the kind of bringing women to the dance floor as well with Lovers Rock as a genre, and then later on we have the deep, heavy, hypnotic dub, and it does, the testosterone is flying later on in the evening, and that was always got to be the arc. It's got to kind of follow that natural path of the night, and some pop tracks like Kung Fu Fighting, and like some moments that he remembered from his own aunt's history and conversations that he had about, big fun tracks that everyone was dancing to and having fun with, and self-choreographing, so that was always there as a path. But even in in scenes that we have outside, people are stepping out of the house to get some privacy or to smoke or whatever, and people are stepping out of the living room, all of those moments we always have music in the background, and they're the kind of few moments that we ever overdubbed anything. But a lot of the time he was still capturing scenes, people waiting by the toilet queue and the music's still playing from the sound system downstairs, because he wanted to get the right bass response, a bit of kind of fuzz to it all, audio. It's probably an absolute nightmare for the mix team, but it was the perfect way to do it, because it just felt real. You got that real response from people on the dance floor across the room, instead of what you can often see where music's been added afterwards, where people aren't quite moving in time, they're not quite resonating with the music, it's not really there. You can hear it's not really there. The volume of people talking. Yeah. But he wanted that all. He didn't want any of that. It had to feel like a fly on the wall in a real blues party.
Yeah, and he did a really good job. I mean, it sounded, the way the tones went in and out from you could hear the treble, then you could hear no treble at all. You just hear boo, 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 like you're behind the loudspeaker, because you're outside. Yeah,
completely. And we wanted to make sure that the Mercury Sound guys, as they were dubbed, our two guys who were the sound system operators, or the actors playing, were they hadn't toasted crowds before this. They hadn't been MCs, so we were. I remember there was in Village Underground in Shoreditch, like just before the shoot, there was a Channel 1 night, which was like a pre Notting Hill Festival like warm up night, and we got them tickets to go and see that, and like things like they had a chat with Gladdy Wax, and we were just kind of hooking up these things. And then you probably ended up having a chat with them on set, Dennis, I imagine, like if there was
of course, you know,
nearby.
Yeah, we talked.
Yeah, put some things right.
Right.
You know, you've got to learn, because it's a very generational thing, and like the very concept of emceeing evolved, you know, from the likes of you, Roy, and over time it becomes rap or becomes different types of emceeing, not the same toasting of crowds that you would have. So the preconception for cast members going in is going to be one of, okay, like I need to learn what it was at that time, because what I hear in a club now is a different interpretation of this.
I mean, I'm coming from a time where with my days at the sound system, the microphone was mine and the record deck was mine. You know, I just had someone to say, "Oh, find that record." And there's someone who sorted the records. If I say, "I want to play this record now," he'd find it, you know, and he was like the selector. So before I had a independent microphone guy, like in 1970, I was the MC and the DJ at the same time, putting the record on. You know, so I had a few tips to tell him about that. And
it's the technology behind it, having to build it yourself and make it your own. And
there's all that too. Yeah, and to keep it rocking, you know. No, they made it their own though, because I mean, originally in my day, you wouldn't smoke near all that vinyl.
No.
No, I mean, hey, the sound system, are you smoking near my records?
Get away.
You know, but these guys turned into that. They were real bad boys. They're like smoking behind the decks, and, you know, they were smoking. Like, yeah, they made it their own.
Yeah, their unique take.
I like that. I liked it a lot. And some people go, "Hey, that never happened. We never saw that." I'm going, so what? It's a fiction, dude.
Yeah,
you know,
bit of poetic license.
Absolutely, you know. So, you know, there was some people saying, "Well, I never seen no man put his hand on a woman's ass in the dance hall because that was total disrespect." I'm going, well, this is a fiction. So at one time, don't tell me there weren't naughty boys in the dance who actually sneaked a touch. You know, but they wouldn't want to admit it now. It's like, oh, that was like back in the day. I mean, if you did that, you didn't really, it wasn't on camera. Okay, so it is that.
Unique spin for new audiences.
Yeah. No, I like the way the kids handled it. When I was in that room thinking, look at all this young black acting talent. And as I looked around the room, seeing them do different dances and the guys at the end getting real boisterous and you know, turning it out, like, because the women weren't there no more. Nobody didn't have to be no polite. I mean, at the end of the dances in the old days, we would have a shuffling contest where the young men would get to dancing and twisting on the floor and doing the splits. You know, there was one young guy who could drop a handkerchief on the floor, okay, do the splits and pick it up in his teeth and get back up, right? I mean, I didn't see any of them young kids do that, but they created their own. And I gotta say, full marks.
And I like how at the end of Lovers Rock, right after Martha's Call to Church, you play Have a Little Faith.
Yeah. Nicky Thomas.
Yeah.
There was a club called Columbo's in the West End in Carnaby Street. And it used to be called the Roaring Twenties. And when they changed the name from the Roaring Twenties and it became Columbo's, I had the pleasure of being in a band, Matumbi, that we opened that club that night, and the featured singer was Nicky Thomas. So, you know, yeah, that was a big tune.
We have a few moments throughout the season in various different ways where Steve would kind of put nods to families with either on their TV sets or near their stereos, there's some kind of worship songs. That like we had songs of praise playing in red, white, and blue in Leroy Logan's aunt's house, for instance. And it's just those. They have deep recollection. It's these moments that are kind of like, yeah, like that's what was playing in that family member's home. And in that instance, it's she's Martha's snuck home. She's kind of come through the window at night. She's had a late one, and then it's off to church. It's off to Sunday mass the next morning, and that was kind of touching on things like that in their own way. Similarly, there's a few Jim Reeves songs as well, which were dear to
I was going to say, Steve, I interviewed Maxie Priest about 3 weeks ago, and he was telling me, how sacred country and Western music is in the Caribbean community. And I was like, Maxie, you're right. And he was telling me how his dad used to play all that. And I was thinking, you see, and, all across the Caribbean, country and Western music featured heavy.
I mean, this was exactly like, Tim, you were asking earlier on about any learning experiences that I had through this beyond kind of the past of kind of working in publishing and knowing bits about reggae. But it was exactly things like this. Right. Like deeper cultural dives of like what Dennis has just said. I didn't know that before working on this and speaking with the team about the script and why Steve had identified those moments, because
he'd experienced it, man.
Hadn't experienced that. No, I was hearing Roman Catholic hymns from an Irish family from a different angle, but kind of you hear these things and it's like I never would have thought, country and Western, but the thread is there.
In my mom's parents' house, no country and Western, but a lot of spirituals and a lot of classical music.
Yeah.
Which you would expect that I had to hide to listen to the Mighty Sparrow.
Yeah. Yeah.
I had to hide to listen to the Drifters. I had to hide to listen to Ray Charles. It was like taboo. What? You're bringing the devil's music in this house? You must have lost your mind, bro.
Yeah.
That's why these are such rich, portraits. You get the smell of the specific foods, and you get the real specific, deep background on what these families and what these characters would actually listen to in their house or in their workplace or on the car. And it's not necessarily the obvious kind of choices from the era or, but it's so educational, but also just so fascinating and rich to be able to tell that part of the story through the song choice.
Yeah, I mean, with Mangrove, Steve was super conscious of making sure that we had moments that were giving us a bit of a locational picture. So we did have, we had a couple of like Nottingham sequences with steel bands. We had a couple of calypso tracks that we kind of dropped in there, and but like a Lord Composer piece, and there was just a few little different things. But then within the Mangrove, didn't want to insinuate at that period of the Mangrove of having kind of too deep a record collection. Like so there was a few Toots tracks that we used, but then he would still want to draw upon different palettes. Like there's a Small Faces track in there in Mangrove, which is kind of more era setting. It's playing in a car, and there's just, each one of the films has its own kind of unique palette. We don't hear any steel bands or calypso or mento in the other films. That's just in Mangrove. And then in Red, White, and Blue, it's more about soul. We've got Marvin, we've got Al Green, we've got Imagination. There's a few. We've got Beggar and Co.
And why is that? Why was soul and Al Green specifically such a prominent part of Red, White, and Blue?
Era and kind of personal story and taste of Leroy Logan, the lead, and he's best mates with Lee John, who was in the band Imagination and is portrayed in the film as well.
Britain's biggest R&B band, and with a history of having had the most hits too. Lee John, I call him L Triple E.
Yeah, he's got three E's in Lee John. Yeah, he's awesome.
That was our answer to Michael Jackson.
Yeah, he's still got the moves.
I know. I know.
We use his song "So Good, So Right" in a moment that I really love in that film, which is when John Boyega, who's playing Leroy Logan, is driving and he's listening to this tape cassette, and it's just this moment of like, that is when you're going to be listening to your mate's band, like on a tape cassette, and he's kind of driving along and he pulls up beside a police car and sees that there's a black police officer, and it's this moment when he's already been running through the idea of joining the police. This first moment where he kind of sees himself in someone else's shoes and goes, he thinks I can do this, but he witnesses it when he's in his comfort zone, like when he's in his vehicle listening to his friend's music, and he's in a peaceful place at that point when he witnesses that and kind of goes, and he can see himself there. But it's tight little moments like that aren't necessarily always big standout musical moments, but they just kind of feel like the right avenue to put in certain tracks. We knew that Lee's music had to be in there somewhere, but that was kind of the one that felt most right.
And I love the contrast of hearing that music and Al Green, and then hearing Billy Joel coming out of the fish and chips place. It's like a stark, it really pops out.
Yeah, we do a few moments like that in Alex Wheatle as well, when like Alex is cutting through Brixton Market and different traders are playing different music, and moments that are quite a stark contrast, but that's a very, that's a powerful, brutal and real sequence. And it's an alien musical moment for where his dad is and for what then happens to him.
Yeah.
All in all, small axe cut down the big tree.
Yeah, man.
I know there's a lot more we could cover. There's so much music in these 5 films. I kind of want to end it there. You've perfectly summarized it, Dennis. It's funny though, the small axe is the music we hear most of the time, and then occasionally we're reminded of the big tree being something like Billy Joel or something like that. I like that.
Bob Marley, when Bob Marley sang, if you are the big three, he wasn't talking T-R-E-E, he was thinking T-H-R-E-E, because there were 3 big record companies in Jamaica that run things, and he was going to be the small axe that was going to chop them down. Him and Lee Perry.
Wow. It's all about music.
They took that, I mean, when Steve took the meaning of, we've got no time to play these silly games into a social context, I was blown away. I was like, I never saw it like that, but hey.
Yeah.
Right on again, you hit the nail right on the head.
I'll just end with a quote from Steve that he gave a great interview about the music recently. He said, "This music became a way to make people feel vulnerable, empathy, and romance. It changed how sound waves and unstructured music can sound to a being. It allowed people to feel whole," which I loved. I think that captures it all. But this is an amazing canvas for music, an amazing showcase for music. I think it taught a lot of people about a musical genre and a culture and a time and a place that many of us were very unaware of prior to this. So it's something to be proud of, and it's really been fun to dig in and pay special attention to each selection as I prepared for this. So thanks, Ed and Dennis, for being part of this conversation. Thanks to the Guild of Music Supervisors for hosting it, and thanks everyone for watching.